James Garner was known as the smooth, charming hero of television and film, the man from Maverick and the Rockford Files. Jack Elam, on the other hand, looked like the villain straight out of a wild western, one eye squinting, that rough laugh, and a face carved from the desert sun. On screen, they couldn't have been more different. Off-screen, few people knew the truth. James Garner and Jack Elam shared one of the most unexpected friendships in Hollywood. When Garner first met Elam on a western set in the late 1950s, he didn't know what to expect. Elam was already a veteran of playing outlaws and gunmen. Garner, still new to fame, thought Elam might be one of those tough guy types who stayed distant. But as soon as Elam spoke, everything changed. He cracked a joke so strange and so funny that Garner couldn't stop laughing. That was the beginning of something real, a friendship built not on fame, but on shared humor and respect. Over the years, the two would cross paths again and again, in westerns on sets and at gatherings of old Hollywood cowboys. But there was always a deeper story that people didn't know, about loyalty, struggle, and how both men faced the darker side of the film industry. And in his later years, James Garner finally decided to tell the truth about Jack Elam, not the Hollywood legend, but the man behind the crooked grin. It was the late 1950s when Garner and Elam shared a set for the first time. The production was tense, long hours, tough weather, and even tougher egos. Garner was still earning his place, while Elam had already carved out a reputation for playing wild-eyed villains who could steal a scene with just one look. But behind the camera, Elam was the opposite of what he played. He was kind, sharp-witted, and strangely gentle. Garner noticed that immediately. Jack wasn't the kind of guy who needed to talk big, Garner later said. He just showed up, did his job, and made everyone laugh. During lunch breaks, while others kept to themselves, Elam would sit with the crew and tell wild stories about growing up poor, losing an eye in a childhood accident, and working as an accountant before Hollywood ever knew his name. Garner was fascinated. That was when he realized Jack Elam wasn't just a character actor. He was a survivor, someone who had lived through hardship, humiliation, and still found a way to smile. Garner admired that, maybe because he had seen his own share of struggles before fame came knocking. That first project didn't make them best friends overnight, but it built something rare, mutual trust in an industry that had little of it. Most people saw Jack Elam as the funny-eyed villain, but few knew the real story behind that face. As a young man, Jack had worked as a bookkeeper. He wasn't born into show business. He fought his way in. The story of how he lost sight in one eye was both tragic and true. A pencil accident during a fight at a Boy Scout meeting damaged his left eye permanently. Instead of hiding it, Jack turned that scar into a trademark. When Hollywood needed a bad guy, Elam didn't fake it, he embodied it. Garner said later, Jack made peace with his past in a way I never could. He didn't run from it, he wore it proudly. That honesty impressed him deeply. Behind the laughter, though, Elam carried pain. He had seen the coldness of the business, being typecast, underpaid, and overlooked. Garner knew that world too. They often talked about how Hollywood could make a man famous one day and forget him the next. Their friendship became a small island of truth in an ocean of make-believe. When Garner finally spoke years later, he said, Jack Elam was the most real man I ever met in a business full of actors pretending to be real. People on set couldn't figure them out. Garner was polished, quick-witted, and cool under pressure. Elam looked wild, unpredictable, and rough-edged. Yet together they were magic. They'd sit together after takes, joking about the directors, the endless retakes, and the way producers treated actors like props. Elam would pull out a cigar, light it, and grin at Garner. Jimmy, he'd say, you're too handsome for this dirty business. Garner would laugh and shoot back, and you're too ugly to be this nice. Their humor drew people in, but what kept them close was honesty. Garner later said Elam was one of the few people who never flattered anyone, not even studio heads. He'd tell a producer straight to his face that a script was garbage, Garner recalled. And somehow they still loved him. They became the unlikely duo who reminded everyone that character mattered more than image. By the 1960s, both men had become staples of the American Western. Garner's charm and Elam's eccentric energy gave life to countless dusty trails and saloon scenes. Hollywood loved their chemistry, even if they weren't always in the same films. Off-screen, though, there was a quiet code between Western actors. They looked after each other, stuntmen, cowboys, and the character players who made the frontier come alive. Elam was always the first to buy a round of drinks, the last to leave a struggling extra behind. Garner often said the Western family wasn't about fame. It was about respect. Jack was one of those guys who treated the janitor the same as the star, Garner revealed. That's why everyone trusted him. When TV westerns started fading, both men saw the writing on the wall. But instead of bitterness, they shared gratitude. "We had our time," Elam once told Garner, "and it was a damn good one." Hollywood wasn't always kind. In the 1970s, when the industry shifted toward action thrillers and modern dramas, many classic Western stars were left behind. Garner managed to reinvent himself with the Rockford Files, but Elam struggled. He was still brilliant, still funny, but the calls came less often. Garner noticed. He'd often invite Jack to small projects or TV specials just to give him work. "He never asked for help," Garner said, "so I just made sure he didn't have to." Those were the years that tested their friendship. Fame could make men selfish, but Garner's loyalty to Elam never wavered. "He was part of my story," Garner said later, "and I wasn't about to let Hollywood forget him." Everyone remembered Elam's laughter, that rough, unforgettable sound that could fill a room. But Garner knew that behind it was loneliness. Jack never played the Hollywood game. He didn't care for premieres, didn't chase gossip columns. He lived quietly, loved his family, and preferred fishing trips to parties. Garner admired that. Jack was the real deal, he said. He didn't act for attention. He acted because he loved stories. When reporters asked Garner later what made Elam special, he didn't talk about talent or fame. He said, "Jack's laugh came from pain, but it healed everyone around him." Years after their early work, Garner and Elam reunited for a small TV project. The crew was mostly new, young, fast-paced, and obsessed with style over substance. But when Garner saw Elam walk in, everything felt right again. The two men slipped back into old rhythms. They teased each other, shared stories, and brought a touch of classic Hollywood charm to a modern set that desperately needed it. "It felt like coming home," Garner said. That reunion reminded everyone, including Garner, of what mattered most: loyalty, laughter, and love for the craft. Garner once said he learned more from Elam than from any director he ever worked with. "Jack taught me that success doesn't mean changing who you are. It means surviving without losing yourself." Elam's life was proof of that. He didn't have awards lining his walls, but he had respect, from legends like John Wayne to newcomers just starting out. Garner saw in him the rare kind of wisdom that Hollywood couldn't buy. "Jack made me laugh," Garner said, "but more than that, he made me honest." As the golden age of westerns faded, so did many of the men who defined it. When Elam passed in 2003, it hit Garner harder than he expected. "He wasn't just another actor," he said quietly. "He was family." Garner attended his friend's memorial in silence, choosing to remember the laughter instead of the loss. But inside, something shifted. He realized that the Hollywood he knew, full of grit, laughter, and loyalty, was gone. Years later, during an interview, Garner finally opened up. The interviewer asked about old Hollywood villains, and Garner smiled. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Jack Elam wasn't a villain. He was one of the kindest souls I ever met." He spoke about Elam's courage, humor, and how he never let the world define him by his looks. "That crooked eye of his," Garner said, "saw clearer than most people with two." The interview went viral. Fans finally heard what Garner had held back for years. Behind the scenes, Elam once helped Garner through a dark time: a lawsuit, exhaustion, and health scares. Garner admitted later, "Jack was the only one who called to check on me every week. No press, no publicity. Just a friend." That's what he meant when he said truth. Jack's goodness wasn't for cameras. It was quiet, consistent, and real. Today, when fans watch old westerns, they still laugh at Elam's wild expressions and grin. But Garner wanted them to see more. "Look closer," he said once. "You'll see a man who turned pain into laughter." That's real acting. Garner's tribute helped bring renewed respect for Elam, not as a sidekick or comic relief, but as a genuine American original. In his memoir, Garner finally wrote it clearly: "Jack Elam was my favorite kind of actor, unpolished, unpredictable, and unforgettable. He made this business better just by showing up." He also wrote, "If I ever played a hero well, it's because I worked alongside men like Jack, men who were heroes in real life." So what was the truth Garner wanted to share? It wasn't scandal or secret, it was simple. Jack Elam, the man known for playing villains, was one of the kindest, most loyal, and funniest souls James Garner ever met. He was living proof that real goodness often hides behind the roughest faces. Garner summed it up best: "Jack Elam taught me that you don't need perfect eyes to see the truth, you just need a good heart."